Have you ever had a sliver in your finger? The right answer is yes. How about a sliver of glass? You can't see it, but if you run your finger slowly over, you can feel it and find a way to pull it out. In a similar way, I guide the eyes of my clients to find emotional slivers from past traumas and find ways to pull them out. Can we really see clues to your traumas in your eyes? Over the past 25 years, my colleagues and I have seen some amazing things with our eyes that I'd like you to see with your eyes. Let me show you one of these emotional slivers. This is a colleague of mine, and during this video, she was focused on a past relationship trauma. The string just illustrates the parallel movements of my fingers and her eyes. Watch her left eye. You see that little blinking that happens? You might think, oh, that's just a random blink. She's just lubricating her eyes. No, because it happens the same place, the same angle every time. Now I'm going to go toward and away from her eyes. So I'm going to use distance. It's a tiny little three-dimensional spot. The same level of precision applies toward and away from her eyes. If instead of that trauma, I had asked her to speak about something calming, like snorkeling with beautiful fish off a tropical island, that emotional sliver probably wouldn't have appeared. I struggled with what to call these points of intensity in the eyes. I could have called them ocular proprioceptive activations involving direction-selective neurons in the occipital cortices, classically conditioned to amygdaloid arousal associated with past psychologically traumatic events. Now you say it. It can easily be shortened to the memorable acronym OPAIDSNOCCCAAPPE. No? Okay, that's it. We're settling for simple and short. Emotional slivers. This treatment is very difficult to explain, but here's a simple start. It's as if we're massaging your brain, using your eyes to lift your heavy heart. We were there the year after the big Boxing Day tsunami, and Indonesian villagers understood those words. I'd like to take you to an example a little closer to home. I was treating a woman for phobia of dogs. We used a cute little lapdog to activate her memories of dogs. Then I guided her eyes, watching for those little blinks and skips, just like the one you saw in the video. I found one in the upper edge of her visual fields. Every time I guided her eyes to that tiny spot, her hands reached up as if to grab something on the top of her head. I remember the expression on her face. What's happening? I remember my father insisted that I get over my fear of dogs. He held a small dog on my head and it was scratching me. Insightful parenting. How could her hand movements possibly be activated by her eye position? Movements of our hands and our eyes can get linked or conditioned to fear. It's as if they got recorded by her eyes and brain during the trauma and they were being precisely replayed. Precisely because, first, we have proportionately large numbers of specialized sensors densely packed in the muscles of our eyes, constantly sending information to our brains about eye position and eye movement. And secondly, because we have amazing sensors in the backs of our brains, each associated with a particular movement pattern or direction or distance. I continued guiding her eyes and found another spot in a low outside corner. Every time I touched that tiny spot, she lifted her feet and legs. The moves were precisely executed, like the choreography in a fitness video. Touch the spot, arms and legs. Touch the spot, arms and legs. She was stunned. Why is this happening again? I remember. I was riding my bike, and a big dog, a German Shepherd, ran up and tried to bite my leg. I was trying to escape. By the end of our third session, she was sad to have to hand that little dog back to her owner. The same little dog who had terrified her just 2 sessions earlier. In addition to the sensors I mentioned earlier, our brains are constantly getting feedback from sensors for muscles inside the eyes that adjust the lenses. In this little animation, the pencil represents distance. Watch the tiny little muscles adjusting the lens as it moves forward and back. It's coming forward to near vision, and now it's going to go back to distance vision. It seems that information about distance can also get stored or locked in our brains during traumas. That's what seemed to have happened in one of the most amazing examples of an emotional sliver that I've ever seen. I asked a woman to focus on a trauma, but I didn't know what it was. Then I started guiding her eyes, looking for indications of an emotional sliver, little blinks, just like the ones you saw in the video. I moved back and back. I got to a distance of 8 feet. Suddenly, wow, I believe in this therapy now. Why? Because you just disappeared. What, my fingers? No, all of you. I can't see you at that distance. Oh, I can see you now. No, gone. Oh, I can see you there. Yeah, you're here. Okay. Nope. I can see you back there. I had a co-therapist with me who was a little taller. I had him stand in the disappearing distance. She says, oh, I can see the hair on the top of his head. The emotional sliver was so clearly defined. I said, does this make any sense to you? Yes, perfect sense. And she described a series of events, starting with a man my height, standing in the disappearing distance. After assaulting her, the chain of events ended with his violent death. It seemed as if her brain had blocked out the place where the whole thing started. When we're pulling these emotional slivers, we're reaching up, over, around, and out. It looks a little odd. Okay, it's goofy. We had a young client watching closely. He says, it looks like you're fly fishing. But you're not. You're eye fishing. Isn't that great? I'd like to show you a different kind of emotional sliver. This woman's face is covered except for her eyes. The blue line runs off the screen to where her therapist is holding her fingers to hold her gaze in that little emotional sliver. Every time the therapist guided her eyes into that little spot, one of her eyes started separating, moving across, moving out. It was as if during the original trauma, which was a bullying incident that was very humiliating and painful, was a focus of attention, and she was held in that little spot, her eyes would separate. Watch her left eye. I showed this video to a group of ophthalmologists in China at a conference where I was presenting. They assumed that the separation was due to nerve damage or a weak muscle. But in this case, it only happened when she focused on the trauma and her eyes were guided into one of those tiny places. We cleared over 200 of those emotional slivers, and we knew we were done when we walked out of the counseling office and it was snowing. She looked up. I feel like I'm standing in a snow globe. She had recovered three-dimensional sight. These emotional slivers were discovered in the process of developing a new treatment for severe, complex trauma, a more gentle treatment. Canadian psychotherapist Audrey Cook had been working with First Nations people who have been traumatized for generations. The usual trauma treatments made many of them feel overwhelmed or numbed out. A new therapy evolved to meet the need called Observed and Experiential Integration, or OEI. Audrey was the pioneer, and for the last 25 years, she and I have developed and discovered over a dozen techniques, including sliver pulling, that are used in various combinations. We've trained therapists around the world in different places, and we now have master trainers in Indonesia and Korea adapting this approach to their cultures. We still have many questions about these emotional slivers and years of research ahead, but preliminary findings are promising. This talk wouldn't be complete if I didn't also tell you that these emotional slivers contribute to conflict in relationships. I was working with a woman and her teenage son. They were constantly arguing, fighting, yelling. I had her stand facing me, and I had her son stand behind me to the side facing her. I said, "Do what drives your mother nuts." He enthusiastically complied. "Whatever? You gonna make me?" "Oh, you're making me crazy." Understandably, that triggered some emotional slivers in her eyes, and I was able to clear them. Then I had them switch places. I had her triggering his emotional slivers, and I cleared those. I didn't see them again for 6 months. When they returned, they told me that their relationship had been transformed by that 1 hour of OEI and was now almost conflict-free. Almost, because he was a teenager. They were coming back because she had recently had a heart attack, and they were now so close that they were afraid of losing each other. We've all had painful experiences with other people. Criticism and rejection, humiliation and embarrassment, deception and betrayal. And we now see and respond to other people through those lenses. The next time you react a bit more intensely in a social situation than is warranted, consider the possibility that you too may have emotional slivers. Wouldn't we all have less conflict and more closeness if our emotional slivers weren't clashing with the emotional slivers of others? It's time for a shift in thinking toward trauma therapies that involve a lot less talk and a lot more action. Why not use our amazing eye and brain connections for healing? Thank you.